I never thought my wedding anniversary would turn into the night that shattered me. The restaurant in downtown Manhattan was glowing with warmth, golden chandeliers casting soft light across polished tables. Laughter drifted through the air, the clink of crystal glasses punctuating the hum of conversations. To anyone watching, it looked like a grand celebration, but I could already feel the unease tightening in my chest. My wife, Evelyn, sat beside me in a sleek sapphire blue dress, a silver pendant glimmering at her throat. Across from us sat her circle of friends, women she'd grown up with, polished and confident, their husbands at their side. They were the type of men who arrived in tailored suits, tossing their luxury car keys onto the table as if it were nothing. The sleek chrome emblems, Tesla, Porsche, Mercedes, flashed back at me like a cruel reminder of the distance between their lives and mine. Evelyn leaned back in her chair, idly turning the stem of her wine glass. Her friends chattered about villas in Italy, weekend trips to Paris, and the latest cars their husbands had ordered. I kept my eyes on my plate, chewing slowly, trying to block out the noise. But then Evelyn's voice sliced through the air, loud enough for the whole table. "While your husbands are out sealing deals and driving Teslas," she said with a smirk, "mine spends his nights scrubbing toilets in Manhattan." The table erupted in awkward chuckles. Some of her friends exchanged glances, unsure whether to laugh or stay silent. Evelyn only smiled wider, her eyes shining with a cruel satisfaction. Heat burned across my face, but I stayed still, swallowing back the words clawing at my throat. I told myself it was just her twisted way of joking. Deep down, I knew better. She meant it. Every word. Then she stood. Slowly, deliberately, she raised her glass. "To new beginnings," she announced, her voice ringing with a clarity that silenced even the nearby tables. I want a divorce. The restaurant froze. Forks clinked back onto plates. Conversations around us fell into silence, and every eye seemed to turn in our direction. Evelyn's words cut like glass as she went on. "I'm done living with a janitor. I deserve someone who can give me the life I want. Someone rich. Someone who belongs at my side." I looked at her, desperate for even a flicker of doubt in her face. There was none. Only a smirk sharp as a blade. Her friends leaned in, whispering behind their hands, their eyes darting between us. The sound of my chair scraping the floor broke the silence as I pushed it back. I didn't trust my voice. Humiliation had crushed it deep inside me. Without a word, I walked out. The heavy door shut behind me, and the icy night air hit me harder than any slap. My chest ached with betrayal, my footsteps heavy on the pavement. I had never felt smaller. My name is Daniel Hayes. For years I've worked as a janitor in New York City. Every morning I pull on my uniform and lace up my boots before stepping into glass towers where the powerful stride passed me without a glance. I mop their marble floors, shine their chrome railings, and clear the traces of their lives before fading into the background again. To them I am invisible. To me my work is honest. My hands are cracked, my back aches most nights, but my job is proof that I stand on my own 2 feet. I've never stolen. I've never begged. I've never lived off anyone else. The work isn't glamorous, but it is mine. There is a quiet dignity in watching a floor shine after I've put in the work. When I see my reflection in a spotless surface, I remind myself that worth isn't tied to titles or paychecks. It's in the grit to keep moving forward when life pushes back. But Evelyn never cared to see it that way. From the moment we settled in New York, she made it clear that the life I was building wasn't enough. She was mesmerized by glittering boutiques on Fifth Avenue, by the sleek hum of electric cars sliding down the streets, by penthouses perched high above the skyline. She measured happiness in luxury while I measured it in honesty, family, and the pride of knowing I earned every step without shortcuts. I tried to close the gap between us. I picked up overtime so she could shop for the clothes she craved. I skipped meals to save for small getaways, convincing myself love was compromise. I told myself that if I worked harder, she would finally see the man behind the uniform, not the salary attached to it. But the more I gave, the further she drifted. Eventually, she stopped seeing me as her partner and started seeing me as the chain holding her back. What made her rejection sharper was the family I came from. My father, Richard Hayes, had built a business empire long before I was born. He was a man consumed by legacy and control, and he expected me to follow his path so that one day I would inherit the empire he had poured his life into. But I was stubborn, determined to forge my own way. When I refused to step into his world, he told me I was throwing away a destiny men would kill for. Our last argument ended with me slamming a door, and for years after that, silence stretched between us. My mother, Margaret, was the opposite of him. Gentle, steady, always encouraging. She would tell me that money could disappear in an instant, but character stayed. Whenever Evelyn mocked me, whenever I felt the world press down on me with the reminder that I was just a janitor, I would hear her voice. Daniel, it doesn't matter if your shoes are worn thin. What matters is that you're walking a path you can respect. My sister Claire is much younger than me. She grew up watching me take the blows life threw and admired me for it. To her, I was a protector, someone who proved you could stay upright without bending to the will of others. Between her college classes, she would call, telling me how she bragged about me to her friends. I never told her what those words meant to me, but they carried me through nights when I felt invisible. And then there was my grandfather, Walter. He was a man of stories, a voice that carried the weight of history. As a boy, I would sit with him on the porch and listen to tales of his struggles during the war. Years when he had nothing but the clothes on his back and the will to keep going. Hardship shapes a man, Daniel, he used to say, but it's how you carry yourself through it that shows who you really are. His words carved themselves into me, forming the backbone Evelyn never cared to recognize. So when she stood that night in the restaurant, glass raised, her voice sharp as she told a room full of strangers that she wanted a divorce. The cut was deep, but it wasn't new. It was the final strike after years of smaller wounds. The disdain in her eyes when I came home in my uniform, the heavy sighs when the rent check drained our savings, the constant comparisons to her friends' wealthy husbands. That dinner wasn't the beginning of my humiliation. It was the moment her contempt finally came into the light. I had walked in already carrying the weight of her disappointment. My hands were rough from work, my shirt carried the faint sting of cleaning chemicals, and my back ached from another long shift. Still, I told myself it was worth it. This was our anniversary. I hoped foolishly that maybe tonight Evelyn would look past the uniform and see me, the man who loved her, the man who gave up sleep and comfort to keep food on the table. Instead, she chose this night to tell the world she was finished with me. The restaurant was filled with the smell of garlic and fine wine, but I barely tasted anything. Evelyn's friends sparkled in gowns and glittering jewelry, their laughter blending with the clinking of crystal glasses. Their husbands sat beside them in tailored suits, gold watches flashing every time they raised a drink. I had pressed my shirt 3 times to make it look sharp, but I still felt like an outsider. I tried to focus on the food, tried to keep the evening calm, but Evelyn didn't let me. She looked flawless in her green dress, though her beauty carried the sharp edge of disdain. She leaned in close to her friends, smiling too brightly. too eager to show off. And every time the conversation drifted to wealth, vacations, or promotions, her eyes flicked toward me with the same unspoken judgment. You are not enough. One of her friends gushed about her husband's new Tesla, describing the doors that lifted like wings. The table lit up with admiration. Evelyn raised her glass and smiled sweetly, but her words sliced through me. Meanwhile, my husband gets his workout mopping floors. Who needs a Tesla when you've got a mop and bucket? Laughter trickled around the table. Not loud, but enough to cut me down. My stomach turned. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay calm, clenching my fists beneath the table. I thought about saying something, about defending myself, but the weight in my chest pressed my voice down. The pride I carried in my work, the lessons from my family, the resilience I'd built over years, it all shrank under her mocking smile. To her, none of it mattered. I tried to change the tone, desperate to salvage some dignity. A tenant thanked me today for carrying her groceries upstairs, I said quietly. Made my day. I meant it, truly. To me, small acts mattered. Evelyn rolled her eyes. Groceries? Daniel, please. These men are negotiating deals and managing portfolios, and you're proud of carrying a bag? Her friends exchanged polite smiles, but the damage was already done. My attempt to restore a sliver of pride only gave her more fuel. When the plates were cleared, Evelyn stood with her glass raised. I thought she might toast to our years together, maybe even acknowledge the effort I had put into this night. Instead, she turned it into a sentence. To new beginnings, she said, her voice carrying over the quiet room. She looked at me, her eyes cold. I want a divorce. For a moment I thought I had misheard. But the silence around us confirmed it. Even the servers froze mid-step. My heart slammed against my ribs. Evelyn's voice didn't waver. I am tired of living with a janitor. I deserve a man who can give me the life I want. Someone rich. Someone who belongs at my side. The room blurred. Her friends shifted awkwardly, their husbands suddenly fascinated with their drinks. My chair felt too small, my body too heavy, my chest on fire with humiliation. I wanted to speak, to defend myself, but my voice was gone. All I could do was sit in silence as the woman I loved ended our life together with a toast. My pride buckled under the weight of her words. I thought of my sister Claire, who always saw me as her protector. I thought of my mother Margaret, who told me dignity would always outlast wealth. I thought of my grandfather Walter, who believed hardship was the truest test of character. Their lessons had carried me through countless storms, but now they collided with the sting of being humiliated in front of strangers. I pushed my chair back. The sharp scrape of wood against polished floors cut through the silence. My chest ached, but I knew I couldn't stay. Remaining at that table meant surrendering the last piece of dignity I still had. I rose without a word. Evelyn smirked as if my silence confirmed her victory, raising her glass higher while whispers rippled between her friends. I turned and walked away, my steps heavy, my back straight out of sheer defiance. The maitre d' tried to offer me a polite nod as I passed, but I couldn't bring myself to look at him. The doors swung open and the cold New York air struck my face like a blow. Outside, the city roared on as if nothing had happened. Taxis honked, voices rose and fell. Couples laughed as they hailed rides. Behind me, muffled laughter resumed, blending into the hum of the restaurant. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, my breath clouding in the night. This was supposed to be our anniversary, a celebration. Instead, it had become the night Evelyn announced my failure to the world. Out there, under the glow of street lamps, I wasn't a husband, a brother, a son, or a grandson. I was just the punchline she had made me into. Her words echoed in my head, cruel and relentless. I deserve a man who can give me the life I want. I shoved my trembling hands into my pockets and started walking with no destination. The pavement gleamed from an earlier rain, neon lights shattering into 1,000 pieces across puddles. Each step replayed her voice, stabbing deeper each time as though she were walking beside me, whispering the same words over and over. Half a block away, I leaned against a lamppost, lowering my head. For a brief moment, I wanted to vanish, to let the city swallow me whole. That was when I heard it. The low hum of an engine slowing beside me. A sleek black car pulled up, its tinted window sliding down with deliberate slowness. Inside sat a man in a dark suit, his expression unreadable, his eyes sharp and measuring. "Mr. Hayes?" he asked, his voice steady and firm. I froze. My first thought was that Evelyn had sent someone to twist the knife even deeper. My suspicion flared, but I managed a cautious nod. "Yes, and who's asking?" The man gave a faint smile, one that never touched his eyes. "Your father sent me." The words landed harder than Evelyn's insults. My father, Richard Hayes, a name I hadn't spoken in years. A man whose disappointment had cut me deeper than anything my wife could say. "What do you mean, my father sent you?" I asked, my voice thick with distrust. "I haven't heard from him in years." My voice felt hollow as the man in the black car reached across the seat and lifted a thick envelope sealed with dark red wax. He extended it through the open window with a steady hand. "Your father told me to deliver this when the moment was right," he said. "Tonight is that moment." I stared at the seal. My heart thudded in my chest. The emblem pressed into the wax, a lion's head, was one I knew too well. My father had stamped it onto everything, from contracts to even my childhood birthday cards. I hadn't seen that mark since the night I turned my back on him. For a moment I wanted to refuse. To tell the stranger he had the wrong man, that Richard Hayes no longer had a son. But curiosity gnawed at me stronger than pride. My hand shook as I reached forward and took the envelope. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind chosen by men who lived for appearances. "What is this?" I asked quietly. The man's eyes never left mine. "It is your father's message. His words to you were simple. Tell my son it is time." Before I could say more, the tinted window slid up. The car slipped away into the wet streets, its taillights vanishing into the blur of traffic. I stood frozen under the streetlight, the sounds of the city dimming around me. The envelope felt heavy in my hands. My breath came fast as memories surged. My father's voice lecturing me over ledgers, the arguments that ended in slammed doors, the last look of disappointment etched across his face. After that silence, no birthday calls, no holiday greetings, not even when my mother begged him to make peace. I had convinced myself he had erased me from his life. And now, after all those years, here was a sealed message delivered on the night my wife had humiliated me. I pressed my thumb against the wax, but hesitated. Part of me was terrified. Was it one last lecture? Another condemnation of the path I had chosen? Or was it something else, something larger, heavier that I wasn't ready to face? Finally, I broke the seal. My hands trembled as I unfolded the letter inside. The first line nearly made my knees give out. "Daniel, my son, if you are reading this, the day I have been waiting for has come. You have endured humiliation, but you have not broken. You have carried yourself with dignity, even when mocked. Now it is time to step into the role I always knew was meant for you." I read it again and again, my throat tight, unable to believe the words. For years I thought he had abandoned me, yet here he was, speaking to me as though he had been watching all along. At the bottom of the envelope I found a set of brass keys, heavy and cold in my palm. Tags hung from them, stamped with numbers and addresses. I turned them over in my hand, the glow of the streetlight glinting off the metal. It is time. His words echoed in my head. I stood there with the letter trembling between my fingers, the keys pressing into my pocket. Anger at his years of silence twisted inside me, yet so did something else, hope. The betrayal of my wife had shattered me minutes before, but now, against all reason, a new door seemed to open. The city roared around me, taxis blaring and voices rising, but I heard none of it. All I heard was my father's voice carried to me through the ink on that page. It felt as though he were standing just behind me, steady, commanding, yet as distant as he had always been. For years I had carried the weight of anger toward my father. I told myself he had abandoned me the moment I turned away from his empire, when I chose to carve my own path rather than inherit his. I believed I had been erased from his life, no longer a son in his eyes. But as I stared at the letter in my hands, that belief began to fracture. These were not words of rejection. They were words of faith. You have endured hardship and humiliation, but you have not broken. You have carried yourself with dignity, even when the world mocked you. My chest tightened, tears threatening to surface, but I pushed them back. I moved to a bench on the corner, sat down, and unfolded the rest of the letter. My father's handwriting was sharp and deliberate, every line carrying the weight of a man who commanded respect. Daniel, you thought I turned my back on you. The truth is I was watching. I needed to know if you could stand without leaning on me. Only a man who has tasted struggle can be trusted with legacy. I withheld my hand not out of hatred, but because I believed you would prove yourself worthy. Tonight you have. The keys enclosed open the doors to properties, accounts, and businesses. They will test you. They will demand everything of you. But they will also give you the chance to rise above the humiliation you've endured and become the man I always believed you could be. The letter slipped onto my lap as I looked at the keys resting in my palm. A rush of memories hit me. Those long nights working menial jobs, scrubbing floors until my knuckles bled. The mornings I staggered with exhaustion. The bitter moments of standing beside Evelyn while she measured me against men who had everything I lacked. My father had seen it all, and instead of rescuing me, he had forced me to carry that weight alone, and now, when I felt broken, he placed in my hands both the burden and the blessing of his legacy. I clenched the keys so tightly they cut into my palm. Anger, gratitude, and vindication swelled inside me all at once. For years, Evelyn treated me as if I were a failure, as though my value could be measured only by cars, bank accounts, or titles. But now, with these keys, I held proof that I was more than she ever allowed herself to see. Yet it wasn't the wealth that struck me most. It was the revelation that my father had not abandoned me. He had been waiting for this moment, and in his eyes I had finally proven myself. I rose from the bench with the keys heavy in my pocket. The city no longer seemed indifferent. The lights burned brighter, the air alive with possibility. A yellow taxi slowed to the curb, and without hesitation I stepped inside. "Where to?" the driver asked. I unfolded a tag tied to one of the keys. An address in the Upper East Side stared back at me. My pulse quickened as I gave him the location. When we arrived, I stepped out onto a quiet street lined with elegant brownstones. My hand trembled slightly as I slid the brass key into the wrought iron gate. It turned smoothly as if it had been waiting only for me. Inside stood a townhouse, grand but not ostentatious. Its windows glowed warmly against the night. I moved through the rooms, my footsteps echoing on polished wooden floors. Shelves held rows of books on business, history, and finance. Paintings hung with deliberate care. Every detail spoke of wealth, but also of discipline, of legacy. It felt foreign and familiar all at once, like stepping into a version of the life I had rejected years ago. And there on the dining table sat another envelope. My name was written across it in my father's hand. I opened the second envelope and found a shorter letter, but its words cut deeper than the first. Daniel, this is only the beginning. What you do next will define you. Do not let betrayal chain you to bitterness. Rise above it. Prove that integrity can command as powerfully as ambition. I am watching, even if from afar. Richard, my knees weakened and I sank into a chair. The weight of everything pressed down at once. The betrayal of Evelyn, the years of labor that had ground me down, the silence of my father, and now this sudden inheritance that shifted the ground beneath me. Yet under all that weight was something new. A strength, a conviction I had not felt in years. I thought of Evelyn at that restaurant table, her smug smile as she raised her glass to my humiliation. She believed she had ended me. But this night was not my end. It was the beginning. When the clock struck midnight, I stood at the townhouse window gazing at the city lights. For the first time, the skyline didn't tower over me. I felt as though I stood taller than the skyscrapers themselves. The man mocked as a failure was gone. In his place was someone with the weight of legacy, the keys to power and the fire of resilience. And though my father's words were just ink on paper, I could hear him clearly. It is time. The next morning felt different. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, spilling across polished wood floors. For years I had lived in cramped apartments with peeling paint and walls so thin I could hear neighbors fight. Now I stood in silence, surrounded by space that carried weight and history. I brewed coffee in the townhouse kitchen, my hands steady for the first time in months. The sting of humiliation from the night before was still there, but it no longer hollowed me, it fueled me. Evelyn had tried to crush me in front of her friends. Instead, she had lit the fire that would carry me forward. By noon, my phone buzzed. Her name glowed on the screen. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but curiosity made me swipe. "Daniel?" she said, her voice softer than I had heard in years. "About last night?" I was upset. "I didn't mean to embarrass you like that." I said nothing. The silence stretched until she rushed to fill it. "I heard something this morning. About you. About Richard. I didn't know he was still connected to you. I didn't know you were heir to anything." Her tone was cautious, but I could hear what lay beneath it. The woman who had dismissed me as a burden now wanted a way back in. "Evelyn," I said, my voice firm, "you did mean it. You wanted me small. You wanted me broken in front of your friends because you measured me against their husbands and thought I didn't measure up. But you were wrong. I was never small. I just chose the harder path." She tried to cut in, but I didn't let her. "You wanted wealth. Now you see it. But you lost me the moment you traded loyalty for greed." Her voice shifted to pleading. "We can start over, Daniel. We can be better. Think about everything we've shared. You can forgive me." I shook my head slowly, even though she couldn't see me. "No. You wanted a man who could buy your happiness. Go find him. I hope he brings you every luxury you dream of. Because what I have now isn't just wealth, it's worth." "I have dignity," I said, my voice steady. "And that is something you never valued." Then I ended the call. The silence of the townhouse wrapped around me like a shield. What I felt was not triumph, but clarity. Evelyn had revealed who she truly was, and my father had reminded me of who I had always been. In the weeks that followed, I began stepping into the world my father left behind. I toured buildings where my name was on the deeds. I sat at tables with business partners who had worked with Richard Hayes for decades. At first, they studied me with doubt, unsure if the man who once pushed a mop could possibly stand where Richard once did. But when I spoke with conviction, when I carried myself with the strength of everything I had endured, I saw the doubt turn into respect. Every time I walked into those meetings, I thought of the long nights cleaning, the aching back, the hands roughened by labor. I did not hide those memories, I carried them proudly. They were proof that I had built resilience the hard way, proof that I could bear responsibility without losing myself. At night, I often unfolded my father's letter again. His words never dulled. They reminded me this was not some gift to make life easier. It was a test, a trust, a responsibility that demanded I rise above bitterness and live with the integrity he believed in. Months later, I found myself standing across the street from the restaurant where Evelyn had torn our marriage apart. Through the glass I saw laughter, clinking glasses, the same glow of chandeliers I remembered from that night. The sting was still there, faint but present, only this time it didn't weigh me down. That night had once been my breaking point, but now it was just another part of the story that made me who I was. I turned and walked away, not as the man humiliated at a table, but as the man who had risen from it. If there's one truth I've learned, it's this. You are not defined by the cruelty of others or by how they measure your worth. You are defined by the strength you show when life pushes you to your lowest. Dignity, loyalty, and resilience will outlast any luxury, any status, any hollow praise. I lost a wife who never truly valued me. But in losing her, I gained something greater: clarity, strength, and a legacy built not on appearances but on endurance. And if my story leaves you with anything, let it be this: your worth is never dictated by others. It lives in the integrity you refuse to surrender.